So it won't be right if you don't swear at us the whole time anyway.
So now is not the time to reveal any secrets or anything like that?
Oh God, no, please. Nothing that's culpable, nothing that can make you liable. Okay, so we've got a bit of a revision class. You're going to see me share screen with you soon. Let's see now. Hopefully I've taken off the porn. Yes, I did. And
I take mine off now too.
can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Cool. Because some browsers are a wee bit more buckety than others. So yeah, as I said to you before, I'm literally going to go through the revision list that Len has given you. And we're just going to, I mean, I gave you enough hints when we were in class anyway, so it's not like this is going to be any kind of over surprise. But by all means, it's the same as usual. Stop me if you need anything clarified, or if you need any practical examples of anything. But to be honest, a lot of this should literally be like it is what it says in the tin. It is revision. Anybody, any questions for me from the outset about how the exam's going to be formatted or whatever?
How's it going to be taken? How are we going to do it?
Okay, so at the minute, I am going to try and find a way to do it slightly. Anybody who's listening to me now, and for those of you who are going to listen later, if you have access to a laptop and your phone at the same time, there might be an easier way to get this over and done with without all the sending and writing and bullshit. I might be able to do something called a Kahoot. Now, has anybody in the room ever heard of Kahoot?
No.
Okay, so Kahoot is a teaching application that I use at Belfast Met, and basically I host quizzes for my class based on the information that we've done during that particular session of the day, and I host it onto this web platform. They've got absolutely tons of them. So like I sit half pissed in the middle of the night playing this on my own because I'm bored, and I'm isolation and all that. But basically, as a teacher, I have a screen, so similar to what you're looking at now in my screen share, that would be what the kids are looking at in class. And then on your phone, if you go to kahoot.it, you put in a code similar to a fashion as you did to get into this meeting, and it brings up like as if you're on a game show and you've got your button.
Right.
So you've got 4 buttons, and those 4 buttons represent your multiple choice.
Right, okay.
So there's red, blue, green, and yellow. So then you look at the screen will give you a question along the top.
Mm-hmm.
So along the top of the screen would be the question, and then on below it would be your options. So the question would be written at the top. Your A, B, C, or D options would correlate exactly with what your paper would be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, pros of doing that, you get it's marked straight away. Yeah. Cons of doing that, I have to put a timer on the question, and it'll be a one shot.
Yeah, that'll be time constrained.
It's going to be time constrained, and it's also you don't have an opportunity to change your answer.
Yeah.
So at the minute, I'm 50-50. As much as it's a great idea and it will get it all over and done with, it also has its cons. So I might chat to Lenny about it and see if we can do a trial run.
What's the other option?
The other option is basically he will do a share screen similar to this. I've told him to do a PowerPoint to basically put the exam into PowerPoint for you. And it'll show up question A, question 1, 2, 3, and whenever it will come up. And you basically just write your answers. Again, you're going to be kind of time constrained with that as well.
So we write the answers down live over Zoom?
Yeah, and then he will get you to message them to a nominated other person in the group, and then you all self-mark. You know what I mean? Or you send them all to him and he will mark them. Or you send it to one of the coaches and me, and we will mark them.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So I think there's a couple of different ways that we could do it, and I will chat to Lenny this evening. What kind of I mean, I'm sure you can understand. I can't just give you the test and say, here, go do that and send us your answers.
Oh yeah.
So,
why not?
I really wanted to sit next to Rory in the exam. I really wanted to sit next to Rory in the exam.
I think everybody might have.
Cat's going to be sitting behind Enough.
There might be something poking you in the back, but sure, you can sit with me anyway.
You see, for the
just pleased to see me.
You see, for the input for them, something that might be useful for yourself. I'm not too sure. We use Google Sheets here we do like a dog sitting business, and people put in their answers.
Worth knowing.
Yeah, it is a but we not that we can fucking do any of it now. Like we're brassic, but
Say
whatever
that, I'll show you my dog for 2 weeks when I'm on my honeymoon.
fucking right. But whenever people put in their answers, it then spits it out into Excel. So
Right.
it's into like an Excel sheet. So that might be a good way of getting the answers sent straight across to somewhere that they're housed. Now, if there's a way, obviously, you need to monitor to make sure that we're not fucking about or whatever. Like, but
Because we use Google Sheets in work whenever we're updating testing results for the boys at the rugby academy.
yeah, I think we use it's forms and it goes into Google Sheets. So we use
Yeah.
it's like a Google form. So
Mhm.
maybe something like that has question 1, A, B, C, D,
And
question
then
2,
we'll
A, B,
get
C,
a drop down of who is. It kind of formulates your results, collates your
Yeah.
results for us.
because it'll spit them out. You'll get like question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 across the top.
Yeah,
It'll answer A, B, C, D. So that just might be an idea.
yeah, might be.
Might
Lenny, if you're
also-
listening to this recording, that was my idea.
Copyright, Steve.
What we'll do is we will get cracking. We'll clarify how the exam's going to be done. We're going to try and make it as fair as possible, but also not disadvantaging because to be fair, I tend to give advice that you don't pour over a question. 99.9% of the time, your gut instinct is usually correct, and the problems come when people read over it and change their answer. The number of people who fail their exam because they changed correct answers because they overthought them. Okay, so we're thinking, who is the iPad that just gives me double doors?
Paddy.
Patio
Paddy
doors.
loves to put stuff.
Sorry.
My name's Paddy. Patio doors. Anyway, we are going to start with. I'm literally looking at Lenny's main revision list a while ago here. So main functions of the skeleton. We had that chat before. Yeah, I'm not going to bother with all this guffy shit. So remember I said to you before that the first 3 were pretty much the same across the board. So the 5 functions of the skeleton: they protect the things, they shape us, they support the things, they provide movement, and they are facilitating blood production. Okay. So we had this chat before. Muscles can only pull, they cannot push. And if our muscles are attached to the bones, which are jointed, when the muscles move, when the muscles contract, then the bones move. We did an awful lot of that when we were looking at our lever systems, and we're going to look at that later on. Tonight is literally a blast through everything on level 3. Okay, so sit back, put your tray tables and seat backs. We're going for a journey. So movement, protection, shape, support, movement, blood production. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Can you see my mouse wiggle?
Yeah.
Epic. It means I'm not pointing to the moon whenever I'm pointing at stuff like this. Okay, so divisions within the skeleton. Do you know what? Okay. I'm literally, if I'm blasting through it, you don't need to know it. All right. La, 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 la. Okay, so whenever we're talking about the shape of a long bone, now the revision list says diaphysis. What part of the long bone do you see there as being the diaphysis?
Shaft.
Shaft.
The shaft.
You just wanted to say shaft, you dirty pig. Yes, it is the shaft of a long bone. Okay, I don't think I could make that more explicit. So happy for me to shift on.
Yeah.
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 Right. So remember we were talking about you had different types of bone.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You had the long bones like the humerus, you had your flat bones like your sternum or your scapulae. Irregular bones like the irregular bones are basically the bones that you only have one of. So the likes of your jawbone, your mandible, you have nothing else in your body that's shaped like that, so it doesn't deserve its own section. And you might think to yourself, shit, but we've loads of vertebrae, what's the crack with that? But each individual vertebrae has its own unique shape. Because
Yeah.
you know yourself, the more you descend down the vertebrae, what happens?
Gets bigger.
Gets bigger.
It gets chunkier, it gets thicker, it slightly changes in shape. The top, your C vertebrae are so much. I mean, you compare your C7 vertebrae to your T1 or to your L1, then you're going to be like, Jesus, chalk and cheese. So that's why they're all irregular. Short bones, we had that chat. They're all the wee tiny mongers, and our sesamoid bones. Okay, now the sesamoid bone is a floating bone. Okay, so like your knee, your patella is a perfect example of that because it sits in its own little toilet bowl of cartilage. And it's a good analogy to use as a toilet bowl of cartilage because apart from the fact that that is how it's shaped, it also helps you to understand how different muscular imbalances can affect the knees. Now, one of the most common, put it this way, if you've done a heavy leg day, what's the most common place that you feel pain?
On your knees,
Yeah. So what muscle set have you worked? If you're doing squats, for example.
Your quads.
Your quads, okay. So
Quads. Yeah.
if your quads are super dead, like you are domed the dick with DOMs, right? In your quads, well then you're gonna have like a particular, like you're gonna poke them and they're gonna be sore, they're gonna be filled with lactic acid, you know, they're really tight, you're walking like a duck, you're struggling to sit in the toilet, yada yada yada. Now, people tend to also get a little bit of knee pain. Now, in worst case scenario, you can get patellar tendonitis, which is an inflammation of the tendons below the kneecap. And that's because your muscle, the quad muscles are so tight that they're pulling up over your patella, squeezing the patella on into the joint and up against the toilet bowl, and that's creating abrasion, which then creates pain and swelling and all kinds of nasty. Similarly, you can get the same type of pain if you have IT band tightness. So that's, if you have IT band tightness, that doesn't push it directly into the toilet bowl, but it pulls it over the side. Let's say if it's anterior, if it's IT bands, it's going to be an anterior. It's going to be an anterior kind of, not an anterior, Jesus wept, a lateral pull. So if your IT bands are tight, then the outside of your knee is probably going to hurt. Does that make sense? If you're yapping to your missus, go on to mute.
Sorry?
If you're going to yap to your missus, go on to mute.
So fuck sorry.
We're all sitting here going, what are you having me, your spaghetti?
Can you get me one of them?
Apologies, Jane, apologies.
We all know she loves you.
Tell you we get that fucking tight on Zoom this last while, boy.
I'll tell you what, I know she loves me as my daughter.
Arts
She
and
loves it
arguments and everything.
So yeah, if I was to draw your attention to any particular bone, it would be the sesamoid bone. Okay, now I remember chatting to you at the time saying that in the exam paper, that was going to be misspelt as semoid, but fortunately you're not going to have that problem now.
And that's a floating bone, Jane, is that right? Yes.
Pardon?
That's a floating bone, yeah.
A floating bone, yeah. Do we remember the difference between osteoblasts and osteoclasts?
One
Blasts
build,
build,
one breaks.
blasts break.
Okay. Blasts build and clasts collapse. So your osteoblasts build bone tissue. So as you can see in the slide there, osteoblasts and osteoclasts are the cells that lay down and break down bone effectively. Okay, so osteoblasts will lay down bone tissue, osteoclasts will break it down. Now, one of the reasons that that's quite important is if you look in the image, I know that this is revision, you're blue to the teeth with it, but if you look in the image on the left, that is pre-growth. The image on the right is post-growth. The red line denotes, basically just gives you a mirror image to give you a bit more of an obvious view as to what happened. Now, you can see that compared to the line here, this part of the bone has thinned. Yep. This part is filled out and this part is taller. So there has to be some kind of absorption and reshaping. It can't just be, let's add layers like a tree. There has to be some kind of reshaping, and that is the role of the osteoblasts, which build and lay down those cells, and osteoclasts, which break them down. Okay? So it can't be more obvious than that. That is a question that requires two answers for obvious reasons, okay? So don't be caught out.
Blast is building what?
Blasts collapse. So blasts build, so they will build and lay down muscle tissue, whereas clasts will break down or collapse bone tissue. Okay, now remember, I'm not sure if I did this with you or if Laura did, but we were talking about a goalkeeping net and how if you fill the goalkeeping net, it becomes really rigid. It's a similar idea. A matrix is what you fill. If you fill a matrix, it becomes really rigid and really hard. That is my dog. He's raging, he's not involved. No, Laura, look after him. Now, where are we? So, bone remodeling. So basically that's what we were chatting about there. So the whole kind of remodeling, the whole process of it, you've got bone reabsorbed in some areas, it is built in other areas, and at the end of the day, as long as you know the difference between osteoblasts and osteoclasts, you should be absolutely laughing. Now, if I was to talk to you about major hormones in bone remodeling, can you see the two hormones I'm referring to?
Two major
Parathyroid and calcium regulating.
Parathyroid hormone and vitamin D. Most people would say to me, what the fuck is vitamin D doing being a hormone? And you know what? It's a really worthwhile question.
Regulate.
Sorry, I need to reply to this poor fucker. Sorry, apologies. So yes, your parathyroid hormone and your vitamin D. Now, because we've done all the brain stuff, you now know what the parathyroid is and the important role that it had in a hell of a lot of other roles in the body. Do we remember that? We had your thyroid and the parathyroid, and then you had your vitamin D. So vitamin D controls blood calcium concentration. So if your blood calcium concentration would be pretty important with regards to how that matrix is filled, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because remember, we're laying down and breaking down bone, but a lot of that's calcium based, because again, bones store calcium. If we flicked back a couple of slides, it would say that your skeleton is good for storage of minerals, and you know, calcium being one of them. Now, moving swiftly onwards, I'm trying to flick back to his revision list. Okay, so remember we were chatting about anatomical language with regards to directions that we would say, like a lot of the terminology that you can see on the drop down menu there. What is medial and lateral? Anterior, posterior, proximal, distal, inferior, and superior. We've all done before. That was all kind of level 2 stuff. And I'm sure now that you're well into the course now, you probably understand the importance of knowing a lot of that terminology with regards to describing movement patterns.
Yeah.
And for you to not only learn yourself, so if Lenny says to you, we're going to look at the medial aspect of XYZ, you'll be like, oh, what? You're like, oh yeah, I'm totally looking at that. I'm looking at the inside of it. The two new terms that we gave you were contralateral and ipsilateral. Now, if you look at the image there in the bottom corner, it shows you contralateral and ipsilateral. And if something is contralateral, it is to the opposite side of the body. So your right hand is contralateral to your left foot, whereas my left hand is ipsilateral to my left foot. If it's on the same side, it is ipsilateral. If it's on the opposite side, it is contralateral.
Right.
So if you were to maybe put contralateral and ipsilateral into a movement pattern, what exercises would you do where you need to do a contralateral movement?
You're going to do like pike toe taps?
Like what?
Like
Yes,
pike-
toe taps, 100%. Yeah, it's a brilliant example. Yeah. And then if you're doing something that's ipsilateral, they'd be like,
and shoulder press?
yeah, it's literally it's the same side of the body, so it's applicable. So if getting the idea of the difference between contralateral and ipsilateral.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Important.
I know you obviously can't say. He's only put contralateral in the revision, but do we need to know both of them?
That would be his massive hint.
Okay.
That one he may as well have just told you the fucking answer.
Okay.
To which I said, "This is your fault, Len, not mine." Now we're moving on to the next thing he had down here is levers. So yeah, everybody loves levers. Levers are our favorite thing.
Yeah, this is something I struggle with.
Okay, cool. I'll slow down over levers then. What I'll actually do is cover levers as if we were sitting in the room again. Okay, I'm not going to blast through it because it is important for you to understand the whole kind of point of the lever system. And a lot of it is just basic biomechanics. So you're basically throwing physics into the body and trying to make it work. Okay, so whenever we were talking about levers before, we said that there were 3 classes of lever: your first, second, and third class lever. Now, luckily enough, the examples that you have in your PowerPoint here are the exact examples that are in your test. Okay, they're not going to throw a random one in there just to see if you know your classes of lever. It's the same examples. All right, so don't panic. So if we are talking about the fulcrum is the pivot point. I said this before, well, I told Laura to tell you that in class, you were to write down both of them beside each other because they're very interchangeable terms. So the fulcrum is also called the pivot. It's the same thing, it's an interchangeable term. The resistance or weight, that is like your resistance is what needs to be overcome to produce movement. Because remember when I was chatting to you before that strength itself isn't how strong you are, but how much resistance you can overcome.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's why it's called the resistance, because even if you didn't have a weight in your hand at all, the weight of your hand itself is a resistance, which is why swimming is an all over body resistance exercise, because the water is the resistance. When you go running, the ground and your body weight is your resistance against the ground, if you want to think of it that way. And then your effort is also called the movement or moment, and that is the force, the actual movement being used to overcome the resistance. Okay, any questions on that bit?
So the effort is your muscle then being used in
Pretty much. That is where the force is coming from. So if you look at the bicep curl they're showing you there, effort they have coming down, if you actually look where the red line, it bisects the line, the horizontal line, that is the point at where the effort is applied. Okay, so that is the pulling point for the bicep. So the whole bicep is the effort because the contraction of it provides movement.
My problem, Jen, is with that picture, I kind of see the pivot as the middle, so I would have had as first class rather than third class.
You see the pivot as what in the
I
middle?
see the pivot as the middle, so I would have put it as a first class.
No, it's a third class lever because you see where it bisects. Realistically, if they labeled it correctly, the word effort should actually be, hang on, I'm pointing at a screen, it's not a fucking touch screen, you knob. See here?
Yeah.
That is the effort. So it's
so it's not the bicep muscles the effort then?
The bicep muscle is the effort, but it falls in between, so the E is in the middle.
Ah, right. Okay. So the insertion then?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in that case, it's, where's my, there you go. That's F-E-R.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. If the arm's out straight, I would have said the P is in the middle, the effort.
Even then, even if that arm was out straight, your tendon is still going to be in front of the pivot.
Ah, I get you now.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
Sure, I had the same question too. That's good.
Mark, yeah. Cool. So regardless of, it's where this tendon inserts into the bone.
Right.
Then you ask yourself, where's everything else?
Brilliant.
Now it gets confused. Like to me, the one that I always struggled with was first class levers. I always struggled with the whole skull and neck thing. We'll move into that now. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you're looking at the lever system here. Do you know what? This is actually a wee bit more clear because you clearly see the tendon point here. So you've got your fulcrum, you've got your effort, and you've got your resistance.
Right.
Now, so a first class lever, okay? So in a first class lever, the fulcrum or pivot is the atlas and axis bones, the very, very top of your spine coming into your, inserting into your skull.
Right.
So that is the point of movement. Now the movement is responsible, the muscles responsible for that movement are in your neck. So no matter what way I tilt my neck, turn left, right, up, down, cockeyed, there is a muscle in my neck pulling to create that action, or a couple of muscles working together as a force couple to move me about and make sure that I can move whatever direction I want. Owls can go the whole way around. If you've watched Poltergeist lately, you can, or what was it? It wasn't Poltergeist. It was the other one.
Exorcist.
Exorcist. your doll just goes full 360 and then you're booked. Then she booked and that made me worse, but still. So the effort then is the muscle. So if you've got a fulcrum coming down this central line, the effort is here, and then your resistance is the weight of your head. Okay, now, in order to make that a wee bit more clear on this image, they put it in order by saying that your effort is here, your fulcrum's here, and your resistance is here. But realistically, the whole weight of your head is the resistance, because that is what the effort or the muscles need to move. That is the force, and then your fulcrum or pivot is basically just the middle of your head, like right on top of that, those two top vertebrae. With regards to the second one here, now this is actually a handy enough one, your second class lever, and it is worth remembering where the fulcrum, resistance, and effort is on this second class lever. Because the action, like say if I wanted to do this action, if I wanted to basically do a calf raise, in this instance, because the fulcrum is here in my toes, now I know that the resistance is pointing to the middle of your ankle, but it represents your entire body weight. Okay, so the resistance in this movement, in this muscle, is your entire body weight. Well then, my calf is single-handedly lifting my 90-kilo Lordy ass. So if I do a single calf raise, I am relying on one muscle plus all the tendons and ligaments and whatever in my foot for support. But I'm relying on this muscle and the soleus underneath it to pretty much lift my entire body weight, which is pretty class. Like there's no way my bicep on its own could handle 90 kilos.
Yeah.
I've always had a massive appreciation for the humble calf. I mean, quads, you need 4 of them. The calf's on its own.
Yeah.
Calf Appreciation Society over here. But if you look at it from the point of view of the little things underneath, you've got your fulcrum at the very end, your resistance is your entire body weight, and the effort is the muscle pulling up from behind. So the calcaneus down here, your heel bone, your Achilles tendon, and your calf muscle, providing all of the effort to raise your entire body weight. Okay, so if I'm doing this though, do you remember we were talking about our anatomical terminology? If I am doing that movement, is that a plantar flexion or a dorsiflexion?
You're right now.
Pardon?
That's the planter now.
It's a plantar flexion, okay? The way I always remembered it was that you plant your foot to pivot.
Yeah.
So you're extending your toes out, you're planting it down, and then dorsiflexion is obviously the opposite. So if I'm planting, is that angle opening at the ankle here, where you see the resistance? Would you say that that angle is opening
Yeah.
as you push down?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're
Just saying. Thought I'd point that out. With my unkempt eyebrows that have been floating around here for ages. Anybody else with caterpillar eyebrows because their beautician warned them within an inch of their life not to touch them myself?
It's just, it's
Yeah.
my hair is going as grey as anything, and I
Yeah,
can't.
Kira, my eyebrow person, basically said, Jen, touch those eyebrows and I'll fucking end you. She's like, you're like Edward Scissorhands, just don't go near them.
Yeah.
Like, what about the wee stretch? Like, and I was like, you're just trying to keep in your step and trade. Now we're on the third. Yeah, so third class levers, are you happy enough with the general principle of why third class levers operate as well? Because we chatted about it there in the first couple of slides about you've got your pivot fulcrum here, your effort, which is the force that lifts the resistance.
Yeah.
Now, remember, as long as you get the middle one correct, then the ones on either side could be in either order. Okay, so let's look at this third class lever. It could be F-E-R, but if I was to flip this image, like say it was my left arm as opposed to my right arm, well then that would be R-E-F, wouldn't it? But it doesn't make a dick's difference because the letter in the middle is the same. Your effort is always going to be in the middle, regardless of what arm it is. So if you see this written as R-F-E, doesn't matter. If you see this written as E-R-F, doesn't matter. If this is R-E-F, doesn't matter. As long as the middle one is correct, you cannot go wrong. Fair?
Yeah.
How do you remember the three? Them in a row? Free.
FRE.
F-R-E. All right? Wee buns. Also, F for first kind of helps too. All right, now.
Jane, you just confused me here.
Did I just confuse how far? Did I anti-teach?
Yeah.
That was
Oh, yeah, grand.
What confuses you? What's your boggle?
No, it's okay. It's all right. It's just what he
Sure.
says about the thing. Right, that's fine. No worries. No worries. Thank you.
Daughter still loves you.
Jane, did you just actually say, what's your boggle?
Yeah,
Props for the Demolition Man reference.
like I do.
Fucking
Good
right.
ball.
Anybody?
Did you see whenever everybody was going batshit for boggle, was going to have to resort to the 3 seashells?
I used to love playing boggle. It was one of my favorite things. Making words out of those little letters. Anybody who's too young to know what boggle is, fucking find it. It is insanely good. Now, the next thing down on his list, he has said first class levers are that the acromioclavicular joint. Okay, dead on. Let's fast forward, because to be fair, all of your questions are conveniently more or less in order in the slides, so we can basically skip past most of that shite. Acromioclavicular joint. Okay, so the AC joint. Now, for those of you who were in class that day, well, actually, no, Laura wouldn't have given you the same example because she didn't fuck up her AC like I did. So, see here. I have a very fucked up AC. Basically, I tried to tackle a friend of mine in training, and I knew that she had a dicky right ankle, so I tackled her and brought her down on the left-hand side. So her entire fucking body weight went smack bang into my arm and popped my AC. So my AC joint is right here, and it was dangling by a fucking thread. It was a grade 3 plus. I was not much away from needing surgery. Conveniently now, it is permanently frozen in a slight state of overlap, which is really handy for my bra strap, but otherwise serves no fucking purpose. Now, when you think about the role of the acromioclavicular joint, though, you would understand why I now have a slight weakness in that side. As I push my laptop back so you can see more clearly. Shut up, Scout. So as I raise my arm, that joint slightly slides over to permit that movement. So if I put my finger here, and as I raise my arm beyond 60 degrees, you'll feel a slight shift in the joint, because as it goes up, a new set of muscles will take over the movement that will bring me up. Now, when I was getting diagnosed, I was able to bring my arm from, here to here, my own. After that, it was literally just like, no. And the reason that happened was because my AC joint was now detached, so there was nothing actually there to support the muscle movement to raise my arm higher. So that's how the physio knew that my AC was absolutely buckled. Did they find that out at the hospital? Did they? Fuck, they sent me home and said I pulled a muscle. Now the hospital shit, just anyway. No disclaimer, don't share. No. So when we're talking about the location of the acromioclavicular joint, apart from you thinking Jen's bra strap kind of area, it's the articulation between the lateral end of the clavicle. So medial would be here. That would be your sternoclavicular joint, and the lateral end, all up to the top. You've got your lateral end, so that's your acromion process. With the acromion process, scapula. All right. So if you next slide, it shows it a wee bit more clearly. Oh, fuck, what did I just do? Directed. There we go. So there we are. Acromioclavicular joint. Here, just at the end of the collar, the collarbone there, clavicle. I do remember we were chatting before about how anatomical terms can sometimes give just like, even if it's a really long word, chances are there's about 2 or 3 words in it to tell you where it is. So acromion process here, clavicular, kind of obvious. Sternoclavicular. Okay. Any questions about the AC joint?
No.
And its location and whatnot?
Can you use that in a question?
Pardon?
Can you use
Can
that
I
in a
use it in a
question?
question? Fuck. Somebody go and slather him with jam.
So tell me this here, Jen. If he's talking about the acromioclavicular joint, then why is it coming up with the glenohumeral joint on that photograph?
The glenohumeral joint is the ball and socket joint. Okay, so if you're thinking
Right, okay.
it's the glenoid process. And then your
And this is the
humerus.
one above it then?
Yeah, it's here. See where my
Okay.
wee waggle is?
Yeah.
Cool. That's your AC joint. Your glenohumeral joint is the glenoid process of your humerus. So it's the socket, ball and socket joint. Someone's here to say hello. Coming up, son?
Oh.
Woof. Woof.
Wee kitty
Oh,
He's lovely.
He makes all the meetings better, don't you? Yeah. Yeah. Where's your mummy? Where's your mummy? Yes, you go get your mummy. Good boy. So often he's waggling his wee Tina Turner tail here. He
Where is it
literally
then?
has a tail like Tina Turner's hair's class.
Oh.
And his name is, and he's lovely. Had I said it too loud, he'd literally come over and walk. Wow.
Oh.
But yeah, he's gorgeous. Now, where am I here? Yes, so the glenoid process is right in here. So that's, imagine the glenoid process as being the socket that your Barbie and Ken doll kind of, pops into. Your T-spine. Okay, so let's move on. Oh, actually, no, we'll clarify another couple of things here on the way through. Yeah, so how many vertebrae are in the T-spine?
12,
How many vertebrae are in the C-spine?
7.
Noting that you never, ever, ever call it cervical because that's completely different. It's cervical. Never call it cervical. Ever. And if you need a reason for that, birds have cervixes. And then get something called a cervical smear. And nobody
Cervical
calls it a
smear.
cervical smear because that's just somebody rubbing a flipping swab up down the back of your neck, and that's just creepy. So your cervical vertebrae is the top 7. Then you've got your thoracic vertebrae is the next 12. Then you've got your lumbar vertebrae is the next 5, sacrum 5, coccygeal 4. Okay. Remember the order from top to bottom and the number of each. Fair?
7, 12, 5, 5, 4.
7, 12, 5, 5, 4. 7, 12, 5, 5, 4. Value cab 7, 12, 5, 5, 4. Okay? If you imagine it like a phone number, you're laughing. 7, 1, 2, 5, 5, 4.
That's right, you confuse it. 7, 12, 5.
Anti-teaching! 7, 12. Is there one vertebrae somewhere? Is there a random one? I don't remember. Okay, so remember the order in and remember how many there is of each. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward. Your spinal curvatures. Okay, so when you're looking at that image, it tells you that there's a cervical curve, a thoracic curve, and a lumbar curve. Okay, now the top, like the key to success here is there's a reason that I highlighted the writing in red. Okay, because the writing in red is very, very key. Remember the order of which they come from top to bottom, and remember that they are all posterior. The top one is concave because it caves in. That's how you remember the difference between concave and convex. Concave caves in. So you see that kind of caves into the neck there?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's convex. And then it's concave again. Now, if I was to fuck shit up and tell you that they were anterior, say we were looking at these from the front, well then, if this is concave here, well then it's convex here, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If this is convex here, well it's concave on this side. That's why it's really important to remember that it's all posterior. So if an answer happened to have the word anterior in it, it's immediately wrong. Okay? Cool, cool. Anybody got any questions about that? Do you get the idea about how it's so important that they're all posterior? Because if it's not posterior, your concave and your convex, your concavity and convexity gets all fucked up. Now, what was next? Muscles involved in kyphotic posture. Now, when we were talking about posture, we had, where's my fellas? There we are. We had all of these different postural abnormalities, didn't we? And on day 1, I'm pretty sure I got you out on the floor to try them. Or was that Team Delta? Might have been Team Delta. But basically, if you were to go out into your back garden and have a go at any of these postures, you would understand immediately why these people are in pain. And if they're not in pain, it means that they have grown up that way and they do have these tightnesses, but they've just adapted and overcome. But you'll probably find that they've got these massive postural abnormalities. Now, your ideal posture there is the boy in blue, and the line that they've given you down there is called a plumb line, and the plumb line is basically the straightest line that can be. There is no point in trying to use architrave or a bit of wall or whatever to tell you something's straight, because do you know what? Builders can be shit. However, if you do have a bit of neon yellow fishing wire and you attach it to the ceiling of your gym and you put a fishing weight at the bottom of it, it will give you a true gravitational straight line, and that will make it easy to spot postural abnormalities in your client. Okay, sometimes you think you can see them, or sometimes you'll think somebody's perfectly even. It is extremely rare to find someone who is perfectly even. Even some of the fittest people in the world are imbalanced because they did too much legs and not enough back, kind of thing. Yeah, you'll see an awful lot of those imbalances the longer that you are in the game. That didn't sound right. Not the game, but you know, the job. Not the job. I'll shut up. So, when you're looking at posture, I don't want you to just look at the spine. I want you to look at the actual skin. So look at the outline of these chaps as we're going here. So when you're looking at, I know you can just see the top of my head. I had to tilt my thing back. It's not like I'm doing a Where's Wally. So if you're looking at Mr. Swayback, what is the first thing you notice about him compared to Mr. Blue?
His
His hips are off, pushed forward.
pelvis work
Pelvis.
His hips are pushed forward. Okay, he's very cock forward, to be honest. Like, to be honest, his neb is further right than his nose. So if you can imagine those people that kind of walk kind of hips first.
Yeah.
His
And a
knees
really
almost
good
behind him.
example of that is actually Conor McGregor
Yeah.
when he's doing his wee swagger.
Different.
He is
Tell Bobby
literally,
that.
like, if anybody watches RuPaul's Drag Race, you'll have heard the term "enter the room purse first." Okay, whereas he's kind of enter the room cock first. So that's kind of your way back. Now, if you had that kind of posture, now he does it as a showman, like, and he doesn't walk around like that all the time. He does it for a specific reason, and then he goes back to normal posture. But if you walked around like that constantly, where would you imagine your pain would be?
Lower back.
Lower back,
Mhm.
yeah.
Where else?
Knees
Like, even
probably
if
as
you're
well.
sitting there, kind of push your hips forward and see what happens.
Your
If you
hip
want to stand
back.
up and try it, by all means do.
Lower back.
Okay, so your lower back's going to be sore. Where else do you reckon you're going to feel postural stress?
Your upper back as well.
Abs.
Neck maybe?
Where is his weight?
Front end of your groin.
Mhm.
front
But where's
end of your
his-
pelvis, sorry.
Where's his weight sitting? Now your weight should sit, if you look at Mr. Blue, your weight should sit right down the scroll into the middle of your arch. Where is his weight sitting?
Forward.
Those toes.
Where's the
On his
center of gravity
ankles.
then to cope?
Legs.
Back of the heel.
More like the his ankles.
Yeah. So even if you, I mean, an awful lot of, everybody notices the back and whatever, but look at his patella.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
And then when you look at the patella, you suddenly notice the alignment of the femur.
Yeah.
Compared to Mr. Blue, you're like, holy shit balls. So where do you reckon this fella's going to have pain? He's kind of leaning
Knees.
forward.
And his knees.
He's leaning forward, but pushing his hips forward to try and correct the balance backwards.
Yeah. So down his femurs, down his legs.
Yeah, so his quad, he's going to be, you probably find he might be a wee bit quad dominant,
Mm-hmm.
and his hammies are probably going to be super tight. He's probably going to have lower back pain. He's probably going to have groin issues. His iliopsoas is probably going to be tighter than a very tight thing. Yeah?
Mm.
So compare Mr. Blue then to military back. What's the first and most pronounced thing that you notice?
The chest.
Yes.
Chest.
His
thoracic.
chest is what?
It's
Probably.
really far forward.
It's distended. Now look at his pelvic tilt. What was very cock forward. What direction is it now?
Yeah, it's
Going
I think
down.
that's his penis. That's basically a bit of his hip, but still. But it gives you an idea of directioning.
Yeah.
And you compare Mr. Swayback to Mr. Military back. What do you notice about his legs, his patella? Very similar to Mr. Ideal posture, isn't it?
Yeah.
The weight distribution and alignment is a lot more similar. you notice the big difference in the spinal curvature at the top. Excuse me. Laura, can you get me a drink or something? I'm gonna die. Love you. Now, so what do you notice then? Compare Mr. Sway back to Mr. Military back and look at his butt.
Yeah, his butt's sticking way out in military back.
Way out on. Ooh, I'm teaching. She's about to
Hi,
hand me-
Laura.
They say hi.
Hi.
She's about to hand me a Carlsberg. I'm like, I'm teaching.
But well, if you're having Carlsberg, I'm having wine.
So anyway, so you can see that his butt's sticking out. Now, whenever we're walking, we need, like we were talking about center of gravity when we were doing biomechanics, your body must balance out somehow, otherwise we don't stay upright. If he had military back but he didn't have his bum poking out, he would basically fall forward. So
Yeah.
his body naturally adjusts and copes by sticking his bum out. And sticking his bum out means that his hip is tilted posteriorly. It's tilted downwards towards the back. So it's a posterior pelvic tilt. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, if you're walking like a wee Kim Kardashian booty, where are you going to feel your pain?
Upper back.
Upper back for the
Lower
point of
back.
view that
Lower back.
Lower back.
well, basically your back's fucked.
Yeah.
So if you've got your butt poking out, then you're probably going to have some kind of gluteal tightness, because remember, there's always going to be an overcompensation somewhere. Now, if we look at Mr. Flatback, A, where his hips pointing, B, what's his butt doing, and C, look at the alignment on his knees.
Yeah, so his knees going back. And his bum's
Knees are
going
what?
back. His knees are going back. It's like very straight leg.
So the line is now going through his kneecap, and it never did before. So there's got to be some kind of overcompensation somewhere. But look at the amount of flesh that is in front of that line compared to the amount of flesh behind that line. We're looking at Mr. Flatback now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look at all that. Tiny compared to, yeah. Automatically, look at the alignment here, again, of where our femur is. And coming down. Absolute shitmare. Now, sometimes you will not see that, obviously. Just as you're looking at somebody in his Mackenzie sweats for the first time, you're going to be like, what's going on under there? And then, you know, you're not really looking at these guys cackless, so you're going to need to have some kind of plumb line to give you a naked eye kind of view. Kyphotic. Whenever we were talking about lordotic and kyphotic, now I know that the proper kyphotic image is in the level 2 material, but this is kyphotic and lordotic at the same time. But whenever we were talking about kyphotic, it kind of looked a wee bit forward head, more like the guy who was forward head, didn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
any of you who watched, what do you call them? Hello, Mrs. Patterson.
Yeah.
Kevin and Perry.
Any, huh?
Kevin and Perry.
It's very like
Kevin Perry.
sulky. It's like
Yeah.
a sulky teenager sort of posture.
Sulky teenager, but you know what? We were talking about the psychological aspect of that sulky teenager body as well, whereby that sulky teenager, if it's a female, might be trying to hide the fact that she's got boobs and she's the first girl in boobs to get boobs in her class. And so you automatically walk with your head a wee bit lower and your arms covering, you know, the, hang on, get up out of a seat here. You're kind of a wee bit more, and that can become a habit. And if that becomes a habit, you end up with a postural deviation for life without even realizing you've built it. So even though some of it is just, oh, fucking oh, fuck my life, some of it is down to a emotional decision that had a cognitive consequence. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like if I am emotionally stressed, I will start to wear my shoulders as earrings because I'm stressed. Yeah, similar kind of idea. But if we're talking about someone who has that kind of posture, what are we looking at with regards to muscle imbalance? Where do you reckon they would be tight, and what do you reckon? Who's drawn on my slides?
Must be you.
No.
But to be really
Not
tight
me.
and like
I think Lee just owned up that there.
For
As long
once,
as
I
it
didn't
starts on dicks, we're all right.
draw them.
So anyway, as we're saying, where is that person going to be tight?
In their chest.
Okay, and what is the net effect of that?
Tight
Their backs
shoulders.
could be
Their
stretched.
back, like their
Shoulders, probably.
Rounded shoulders.
Rounded shoulders.
Okay, so they're going to have rounded shoulders. And what is the net effect of someone having rounded shoulders? What might they report to you as a symptom?
Just a sore back all over.
Maybe a propensity to get some headaches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if your
Tension.
chest is tight,
I know,
then
yeah.
your shoulders are rounded forward, which means your scapula are separating, and you cannot create flexibility out of thin air. It has to come from somewhere. There has to be a buyback somewhere. So if you can imagine, if you look at in your mind's eye now, I want you to picture the anterior aspect, the posterior aspect of the body. Look at the trapezius. If your shoulders are rounded forward, your trapezius is getting stretched
Outwards.
outwards.
Yeah.
And if that's happening, then the inferior and superior aspects of your trap are getting tugged downwards. So as this is coming wider, this is getting squished in.
Yeah.
That means that your the back of your neck is probably going to get pulled back a wee bit. So you're going to be a wee bit. Fuck.
Your bench press would be shit.
So one of the things that in the other job as a masseur that people report back to me quite a lot is that whenever they're in this kind of Kevin and Perry kind of thing, is that they get headaches and they always feel like their hair is getting pulled. That's the imagination that they get. They feel that something's trying to pull them back, and it's basically their trapezius crying. That's what's holding them back. How do we fix it? As trainers, how do you fix it?
Stretch the chest and then do them face pulls. So tighten your traps.
Okay, so
Pull your
you
shoulders back.
loosen and stretch the area that is causing the problem, and then you strengthen the antagonist. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you strengthen the other area in a sense.
Yeah, strengthen the trap, and then it's strong enough to bring your shoulders back naturally,
Right.
and then you rectify the you rectify the postural deviation in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sweet beats. So, what was next on his list? Anybody any questions for me about that or anything so far?
No.
All
No.
good? Sweet
Good,
beats.
yeah. Cheers.
Now, I'm going to move on to arthrokinetic dysfunction. Okay. Now, do you remember I was telling you this before that a lot of these sentences are basically made to sound extremely complicated and smart arse, when really it's a very basic and simple idea. The term arthrokinematics, it refers to the motion of your joints. So when we're talking about postural deviations, I want you to keep this in mind. An arthrokinematic dysfunction, so obviously a dysfunction is something that is not functioning. It is kind of like an opposite. If it's dysfunctional, then it is not working optimally. So arthrokinematic dysfunction is a biomechanical, so a movement pattern, and neuromuscular, so the brain to muscle dysfunction, leading to an altered joint motion. So let's put that into a workable example. So I have done a really heavy arms day or chest day, for example. I've ripped the ditties of myself, my chest aching, right? So automatically I'm going to try and conserve, like I'm not going to, it's too sore to try and sit with my shoulders back. So they draw forward ever so slightly just to give me a little bit of respite from the pain of my DOMs, okay? Automatically, I have an arthrokinetic dysfunction because biomechanically, my shoulders are sitting further forward than they should, which means that whenever my brain tells me to raise my arm and reach for something behind me, different muscles have to do that because my chest is too sore. I have to overcompensate and use different muscles or try and find a different way, or I'll turn my body around more instead of just stretching back. So that's a neuromuscular dysfunction. My muscle isn't doing necessarily what my brain told it to do the most economical way that it could. So it's a neuromuscular dysfunction. and that
Like-
leads to an altered joint motion. So previously I'd be able to go, yeah, sweet, but because I'm fucked, I have to alter my joint motion. I suffered from this every single Monday of my rugby career because Sundays killed me.
Would that be, Jen, a bit like if you had your neck when you slept funny and you went to turn around in the car, you turn your whole body
Yes, pretty much
instead
it.
of just looking over your shoulder?
Yeah, instead it's just being like, yep, no cars. Instead you're like, hang on, don't crash. Yes, I'm sweet. Turn. Yeah, so that's a similar idea. Okay, so an altered joint motion can be caused by an altered length tension relationship. So when you're talking about that issue with your blind spot, if you have altered length tension in that muscle that doesn't permit you to turn around as much as you usually would, well then that's going to fuck up your force couple relationship. So the example I used was between your trap and your chest. You've used one there with just both aspects of your neck and your shoulder girdle. So basically, because you're unable to use your muscles in the way that you normally would, you have poor movement efficiency. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So if we're talking about a dysfunction, something has gone wrong along the path of movement. So if you had a path of movement, say, to put you in the ideal position, like your ideal posture for a squat, for example, but you've absolutely banjoed your hamstrings, so it's really uncomfortable to lift, well, are you going to be able to maintain correct form? No. So what are you better doing then? If you're say you'd leg day on Tuesday, but you decided I want to smash legs again on Thursday because I'm a mad bastard, what are you going to have to do to change things?
To change your fucking training cycle.
Yeah, fair. But what else could you do? Say you've got an injury on that hamstring, it's a little tight, there's a little bit of a knot in it. What do you do then?
Stretch it out.
You can stretch it out.
Bum
Or
roll.
modify the exercise to allow for the dysfunction.
Work the antagonist.
Could work the antagonist, yeah. Or instead of I don't know, instead of including any kind of squat in it, you could do something different that'll work your legs. Maybe you're going to go onto a machine weight that'll isolate your quads specifically instead of using the macro movement. You know what I mean? Use machine weight instead of a free weight, so it's a little bit more under control.
Yeah.
You're not going to rely on your hamstrings as a synergist then, even.
Mm.
You're going to be able to isolate them out of it. Neuromuscular efficiency. Yeah, no, I didn't really need that. Do you remember chatting to you about a plumb line? That's why it's important. I know if you looked at this person with the naked eye, because it's really obvious, you'd probably be like, fuck, she's leaning. But if
Yeah.
it wasn't that severe a deviation, then you've got to use your other methods to find out what's going wrong. So if you don't have access to a plumb line, the easiest way to find out if there's any kind of spinal abnormality, left to right, then look at the keyhole. See underneath the arm there?
Yeah.
Keyholes here are fairly even, which would suggest that there's no pelvic tilt and there's no spinal abnormality here. But if you see it's bigger on one side or the other, or in fact that their hands rest in front of themselves. So if your hands rest, if the hands rest in front kind of a wee bit like that. Here's my crotch. But you know, a lot of people have their hands resting kind of like there. That's going to tell you something too.
What, your crotch?
Oh, aye, my crotch is stories. My crotch is releasing its own novel. Favorite diaries of a crotch. So, yeah. So whenever we're thinking about how to do a postural, I mean, I'm sure that Lenny has gone over how to do a postural analysis by now. And when he did, what did he tell you? On a how-to and postural analysis. Don't all shout out at once. Can't cope.
You're talking about from the point of view of doing like an FMS screening.
100%.
So it would be starting from I think it's starting from the top, working the way down. Is that what you mean?
Mm-hmm. So you start from the top and you work your way down. And what are the key things that you're looking for?
Shoulder alignment.
Mm-hmm.
Shoulder alignment, hip alignment, and the things.
Mm-hmm.
The keyholes.
Mm-hmm.
Also, something to do with the knees as well. The knees were off level as well.
Knee height, yeah.
Knee height.
If their knees are rotated.
If they're rotated anteriorly or medially or laterally.
Yeah.
Or if they look like they're under strain, if there's a lot of like swelling around them, even could give you a hint as to what's going on. And then even if you're looking at it from side on, you're looking at bum, you're looking at curvature in the spine, you're looking at shoulder position. If you're looking from the rear, you're maybe looking for the back of the knee alignment, because you know when you've got a wee stroke across the back of your knee, like a wee wrinkle. If it is malaligned as well, it can screw you up. So even if you look at this per chap here, you can see that the two knee heights from the back of the knee are pretty much completely off. Then you've got foot alignment. Are the feet sitting 10 to 2? Are they 11 to 1? Are they 9 to 3 like Charlie Chaplin? Okay, so moving on with his list, what was next? Do you remember we were chatting that it's really rather important to remember all of the degrees here?
Yeah.
Okay, just leaving it out there. What was next? Scapular position. Okay, so the scapula rests at a position on the posterior thorax, approximately 2 inches from the midline, between the 2nd through 7th ribs. Okay, now what I am going to do, if I can find it, is pull up the test so I can give you a bit more specific advice.
The question.
Fuck, I'm not giving you the questions. I have to be giving you the answers anyway. I can be bribed, by the way.
Carlsberg.
Carlsberg, fuck. Where am I here? Documents, yes.
What's your poison, Jen?
See, to be fair, I'm kind of 50-50. My poisons are seasonal. I like during spring, summer, I'm all about the gins and the elderflower ciders and the Malibu and milk and whatever. Whereas when it comes to winter, I'm all about the Hennessy and the Guinness. Well, to be fair, Guinness is all year round. And whatnot. Where am I here?
Fair enough.
Oh, look, that's testosterone.
Screenshot.
Screenshot. What's that saying? Reverse. No, where am I here?
Paddy's going to send that into the FBA and they're going to send it out. Get all the questions.
Believe me, I've other people that can send it to, not the FBI.
All after you.
Okay, so reversey Percy. Yeah. See this sentence?
Mhm.
Yeah. See this sentence?
Mhm.
Yeah. Good chat. Good chat, folks. Good chat. Good chat. Good chat. Where am I here? Aye. Do you see this this rotation? Yeah? Do you see that rotation? Yeah?
Yeah.
Good chat.
Sorry.
Good chat.
What rotation? The top one or the bottom one? That one.
Internal rotation.
30, 45.
Good chat. It's the whole sentence, to be fair, but the best way to remember it is just remember that one. Remember that as an internal rotation, not an external rotation. Good chat, that's good chat. Okay. Happy enough? Moving on?
Yeah.
Okay, so the scapular humeral rhythm preserves the length tension relationship of the glenohumeral muscles, and it stops the impingement between the humerus and the acromion. So remember when I was chatting to you that when I busted my shoulder, that I struggled, I couldn't raise my arm beyond 60 degrees. So if you look at this fella here, when the body had gone 60 degrees out from the midline, my body failed, my muscles failed because there was nothing clinging here. This had busted. So my arm was kind of stuck at 60 degrees out. Look at you practicing.
No, I have a fucking busted shoulder too.
for the remaining 120 degrees, whereby the other muscles in my body should have taken over, they couldn't because the joint had failed. I had an arthrokinematic dysfunction because I had altered joint motion. And the reason I had altered joint motion was because the tendons in my AC joint were no longer there. They couldn't preserve any tension. There was literally a string left. So I needed then to do a hell of a lot of rehabilitation and a hell of a lot of healing and mobility and exercises and stuff before I could get my full movement back, you know, wonderful as it is. But there was a problem there with the first 60 degrees, and that is because the scapular humeral rhythm preserves the length tension relationship of the glenohumeral muscles, and it stops the impingement between the humerus and the acromion. So if we didn't have that little bit of movement at that joint, it would if you can imagine, if this didn't
Just
cross
butt
over
up.
slightly to allow movement, it would literally impinge the nerves. It would literally squeeze and squeeze and squeeze up against, and there would be no movement. I would get as far as here, and it'd be like, like T-Rex arms, only like wideways. So, yeah. Any questions on that?
No.
That's cool.
What part of it's going to be in the test?
Read.
Paddy asked that.
Don't be blaming it on me. It was fucking was me itself, you big lad.
Okay, so I want you to think about what muscles are responsible for that then. Okay, so what muscles do you see there?
The subcumuloclavic, or what do you call it?
The deltoids.
Not just the deltoids.
Serratus anterior and upper lower trapezius.
Okay, but what about the glenohumeral abduction?
The rhomboid.
Glenohumeral abduction. What's
Adduction.
basically what is the first sentence underneath glenohumeral abduction?
The
Rotator
deltoid.
cuff and delts.
Coupling of the rotator
Delt.
cuff and deltoids.
Remember that. Close coupling of the rotator cuff and the deltoids. It accounts for the first third of glenohumeral movement. Then the other 120 degrees is responsible of the serratus anterior, those boxer muscles, and the upper and lower trapezius. Okay. But you are worried about that first third of movement.
Yeah.
2 thumbs up. Any questions? Now, quick fire question. When we were talking about muscles, what were the different, I'm not going to put it up yet, what were the different layers of skins called in the muscle?
EPE.
Yes, what are they?
And epimysium,
Mm-hmm.
periosteum, and endomysium. Is that
Not
right?
periosteum, that
Oh, sorry,
is your bones.
Perimysium, sorry.
Paramysium, yeah, they're all mysiums.
Paramysium.
It's a mysium club here. So you've got your epimysium, your paramysium, and your
Endomysium.
endo. Yeah, that's how you remember the difference between your 2 E's. Endomysium. Right? That is worth remembering. Just saying. But well done. You've got all 3. Yes, Queen. Where am I here? Nearly said it out loud.
Say what? Say it again.
Now, when we are talking about muscle contractions, what were the names of the contractions that we worked on? The names
Eccentric and
yeah, concentric.
eccentric and concentric.
Concentric isometric
Yeah, concentric, isometric,
and eccentric.
eccentric,
Isometric.
What do Lucas love saying that the drinks are?
Isotonic.
Isotonic.
Sweat. Okay, so if we were to try and work out, how do I say this without actually telling you the question?
No, just
If we
throw it away.
remembered,
Stop recording for 30 seconds.
if we remembered the difference between isotonic and isometric, we'd be on to a winner. And if we remembered the difference between concentric and eccentric, that would be rather important. Okay?
So
Okay.
I'm
So-
fucking lost here.
So this is
lost?
very cryptic.
Who's lost? Okay, so we're talking about
So is-
muscular contraction. Let's go to the, let's avoid all this Huxley's bullshit that, you know.
So is the
I am
say
a-
as the question
Yes.
that question, would it be just like the tension stays the same and the muscle lengthens? Is that
I-
is that it?
Kinda.
Oh, right.
We'll put it this way. If we are talking about a concentric contraction, give me an example.
Extension.
Okay, so Steve, you did a bicep curl there, and it's a perfect example of it. So a bicep curl is a perfect example of a concentric contraction if you're talking about the bicep. Yeah? But
Yeah.
a bicep curl will be an eccentric contraction to the tricep, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So the bicep curl is concentric to your bicep because it is shortening under tension. But in a similar way, your tricep is lengthening under tension. So for your tricep, it's an eccentric contraction. Like say, for example, you're learning how to do chinnies or pull-ups, sorry, and you are really struggling. You can't even get the moment to even, like, you've got your hands on the bar, you're on the ground, and you're like, holy fuck, I'm never going to be able to pull myself up on this thing. But if you start up there, if you get onto a plyo box and you start up there and then you release yourself down, right? So you're forcing your bicep apart, you're lengthening it under tension. So it's an eccentric contraction. Yeah, you start with the bar here, and it's like fuck, really hurt. But your bicep was constantly in tension as you were dropping. You didn't just free fall. Yeah, you tried to control the movement, but you were lengthening. Lengthening under tension is an eccentric contraction. Okay, both of those are isotonic because there's movement involved. Whereas an isometric contraction is where you're sitting still, but you still got a bicep curl going on, but the muscles are neither lengthening nor shortening. You're just sitting here nice and still, holding the weight. But because I'm holding the weight, my muscle is still tough. It's still toned, still hard, because my muscle's still working. There's just no movement in any direction. So it's neither concentric nor eccentric, it's isometric.
David brought us through loads of like isometric holds and stuff like that on Saturday there. He was doing the FRC module with us.
Have you met him
so
in
that-
person yet?
No,
Or just virtually?
just virtually.
He is a fucking specimen of physical perfection.
I noticed.
Well, fucking, it's just not.
Nearly turned straight. He is literally the body of a god. If you ever wanted to look at perfect posture and perfection, look at Dave. Anyway, moving onwards before I float out of the room.
Or a can of Carlsberg comes hurtling across the room at you.
I'd slip in the snail trail before I got to it. Where am I here? Muscular contraction, yada yada yada. Okay, so do we know now the difference between the isotonic and isometric?
Yeah.
Isotonic involves movement. Isotonic is the parent and has two kids, concentric and eccentric.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the term isotonic has two subcategories: your isometric and your concentric and eccentric. Whereas isometric, you're static. Your muscle's still working, but it's not moving. Right. So moving into the sliding filament theory, because that's everybody's favorite thing. What are the names of these bad boys? This stuff here and this stuff here.
Mitochondria is one of them.
Not mitochondria, but it begins with an M and it has an IO.
Myosin.
Myosin, yeah, my old son, and
Actin.
actin. Okay, so the blue stuff that you see there is sarcoplasmic reticulum. Now, everything that is a reticulum, the word retain is in that, so I want you to imagine that it's a sarcoplasmic skin. And basically the purpose of the sarcoplasmic reticulum is that it's responsible for storing calcium. Calcium is important on down the line. But ultimately, we remember about, with regards to the sliding filament theory, the most important part to remember is that it's to do with actin and myosin sliding over each other. Okay? Now, which ones are active in this movement? Actin or myosin? Which ones are actually doing the movement?
Actin.
Myosin.
Myosin are moving, but actin's the one that crawls. Or like, no, myosin's the one that crawls, but actin moves past myosin.
Good way to put it. Okay? So, myosin is putting all the effort in. Hence the analogy of my old son making a hell of a lot more sense, because the fellas do more of the effort. And the actin is moving closer together as a result of the action of myosin. Okay, so the thin filaments slide and the thick filaments attach and create that movement. Does that make sense? Do you remember we were talking about the row and bow grabby idea? Grab, pull, grab, pull. And if you're choosing, I'm doing fucking actions to it. So these two lines will come closer together because myosin is pulling actin towards itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In some weird, fucked up way. Now, do I need to go into more detail about that, or is that just a waste of your time? Now, remember we were talking about if you want a revision list for that entire muscular contraction thing, by the way, that's the one to go to, because it basically tells you what's going on stage by stage. Does anybody want me to go over it now? Silence is compliance. Excellent. So, where am I here? La, 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 la. Oh yeah, there's our slides on isometric and isotonic. So pop over those whenever you're ready. La, 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 la.
Fuck.
I hear you.
No, it's not you, Jen. It's just I'm fucking realizing I don't have these fucking things at all here.
What things?
These manuals. I have the books, and I have lost the manuals. So in other words, see the slides that you're seeing, I don't fucking have them. And I'll check
They're
through
in
my
the
phone here.
group chat.
They're in group media a bit.
Oh, are they right? Okay, I'll maybe go through.
They
it.
are.
See
They're in group. Like all of this stuff here is all on your group media. I sent it all through.
Right. Okay. That's
Unless you did what I did one day and deleted all the media because you needed
No.
space for a new golfing app.
Do you know what I've actually done? I've actually emailed them myself, and I've lost half my fucking emails. I put it through. Took it out of the WhatsApp group and put them into my email group. And I've lost half my fucking
Do you
emails.
want me to re-upload them again?
No, that's fine. I'll just check through the WhatsApp media. So
Check the WhatsApp media. If it's not there, just pop it in, and one of the group. First person to see it will pop them back in.
spot on. Thank you.
Okay, just share it back in. It's easy. It's easy enough. No. So, when we're talking about muscle force velocity, okay, when you're looking at, remember I did it in class. Delta, I've already heard all of my shitty analogies for this, but whenever you look at this graph, you can see here that when actin and myosin barely touch each other, you've got shit force production. When actin and myosin have overlapped to the point where it's ridiculous, you've shit force production. Can you kind of see why? Here, there's very little attachment between the actin and myosin filaments, so that's going to be a really low output with regards to muscular contraction, yeah?
Yeah.
Whereas if you've already overlapped completely, where are you going to go? You can't shorten any further, so again, you've no force production here. Now, if you look at the optimal line, you can see that every bit of that myosin is overlapped with the actin. It's not too far over. It's not, still trying to shorten. Every bit of it is covered to perfection. And that is where you get your maximum power output or your maximum tension. Do you get the general principle of that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because that will help you with your question on actin and myosin. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, muscle force velocity. It refers to the relationship of a muscle's ability to produce tension at different shortening velocities or different shortening speeds. As the velocity or speed of a concentric muscle action increases, its ability to produce force decreases. So let's go back to our bicep curl. If you're going to do a bicep curl, everything's brilliant. Like when you're in the middle. I mean, we're kind of referring back to this graph. If you hold that weight out at full length before you even start, well, you obviously give it a wee bit of juice because nobody ever starts completely flat unless you're a complete moron. But you give yourself a wee bit of juice endurance. But the hardest time to lift that weight is at the very start, isn't it? You have to overcome that resistance. Then you get to the middle where everything's kind of flying, and then you get to the top where again you start to lose the ability to keep the motion going, keep the tension going, and that kind of directly relates. So how you, where is my mouse? My mouse has disappeared. As the velocity of a concentric muscle action increases, the ability to produce force decreases. So if you imagine as your actin and myosin filaments have started to slide over, the more that they slide over, the less that they can potentially slide over more. So the closer that these guys get, the more reduction in space that there is. So once you're here, you can't produce any more force. That's it. You can't, there's nothing left to slide over. So if I'm out here, it's all very loose. It's like, oh, really low force production. The closer I get, sweet, I'm producing loads of tension here. And then as soon as I get to here, it drops. So that's the kind of idea that as a concentric muscle action increases, the ability to produce force decreases. It is thought to be the result of the overlapping of actin and myosin filaments, but with an eccentric contraction. Remember, eccentric is that you're under tension, but it's getting forced apart. So as the velocity of muscle increases, the ability to develop force increases. Oh, Jesus, my neck's getting stiff. Okay, so if I was to advise you with regards to it, I would maybe pay attention to that first sentence. And then it's always at differing shortening velocities. Okay. Anybody else? Hank Marvin, I haven't had my dinner yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if we were to put our arthrokinematics into an example, when we're talking about optimal force generation, if you were to say to me, what coaching points would you give someone doing a lunge or squat? What kind of coaching points would you give somebody for that? If you're thinking about optimal force generation.
The lower they get, more.
I'll be more specific. If you're talking about their feet,
Yeah,
their
on their
knees and their toes,
horse pair of heels.
what would your advice be with regards to feet, knees and toes?
They have to be in line.
Line.
He's going
have
in,
to be
in
in
the
line?
direction of the toes.
Okay.
He's moving in the direction of the toes.
Knees over heels.
Would your foot be straight or bent?
No, 10 to 2.
Okay. Okay. Cool, cool. Good chat. Good chat. Now, Golgi tendon organs. What are they and what are they for?
What allows you to, well, if you're stretching and warming up, what allows you to gain more range of motion, essentially?
Potentially. They're partly, they send the message to the brain as to how tense your muscle is. it's kind of like the emergency fail-safe as well. That do you know the way if you bend down and your back's a wee bit stiff, but you bend down and you get jolted, it's like, oh fuck. Your Golgi tendon organ sent a message to your brain saying, if you continue in this action, we are going to ping. So it sends you a jolt to say, Jesus, I might, do that again when you're a bit slower. And you find if you do it slower, you can achieve the movement. So if I dropped a penny in the ground, and because I'm a stingy fuck, I'm going to bend down and get that penny. But if I do it really quick to stop somebody else getting it, I'm going to spasm my back. But if I think to myself, all right, it's okay, there's nobody else about, I can do this slower, and then bend down a wee bit slower, I can still achieve the movement, but without the pain because I slowed down. Okay? So they're sensitive to muscle tension and active contraction, and they're less sensitive than your muscle spindles, but they're wee legends. Where am I here? What's next on his list? Where do we find our Golgi tendon organs?
The between the muscle and the bone, the end of it.
What's proving the name? Tendon organs?
Tendon, aye.
In the tendon.
Yeah. Cool.
Are they actually in the tendon?
Yep.
Yeah.
So they're not in the heart, so they wouldn't be in cardiac muscle, sure they wouldn't?
No.
No. And they're not really a sensory organ. Like they're not like your eyes, your nose, and your tongue or whatever.
No.
Cool. Just remember that bit, that's handy. Now, remember we were talking about the arrangement of muscles and how every muscle is arranged A, anatomically correct for where it's positioned, and B, for optimal function. So if we, like say for example, if we were talking about our pec, if every single muscle required for movement in our chest was bicep shaped, could you imagine what shape we would be? It would be ridiculous. It would be like a Michelin man. So Mother Nature gave us one muscle that spanned this entire area instead of lots of little muscles, and they all converge onto the one point because this point is important for general movement, and that would be on your humerus. Okay, but the shape of the muscle works for the job it needs to do. Okay, so it's nice and flat. Otherwise, we would be far too heavy to the front of us, and it all converges into one point. Now, the likes of the orbicularis oris and the orbicularis oculi, do you remember we were chatting before about muscle function, not only to keep us warm and to give us movement, excuse me, burping, and to give us movement, but also to guard entrances and exits, hence circular muscles. If we have our lips pursed, there is no access. And we'll not talk about the other areas that have circular muscles and the guard entrances and exits. Unless you've had one too many of the old Balties. You wake up with a Bombay bed bath because nothing's saving those muscles. Nothing is saving those muscles.
On a Tuesday.
Air is particularly difficult to stop escaping.
Oh, Jesus fuck.
Jesus doesn't fuck, apparently he's the bird.
Stop now.
If we're stop it now, stop now. Down with that sort of thing.
Yeah, some of us are in isolation alone, so please don't be going into detail like that.
Well
you can
said.
fart freely, don't be worrying.
Yeah, it does not help.
It doesn't help when your dog does silent but deadly. You don't hear him, but sweet baby Jesus. He could clear a room in minutes, seconds. Anyway, I've been hovering over the unipenniate muscle here pretty specifically because it's the one that, well, you put it on the frickin' revision list. That's the one on your test, okay? So learn about its structure, its function, and examples of, okay? Because if we were talking about a unipenniate muscle, I want you to do you notice what way all those fibers are moving, like compared to the likes of your calf, where the fibers run differently, where your deltoid, where the fibers run differently, your orbicularis muscles, all the fibers are all differently shaped. Pay attention to the direction that your unipenniate muscles go. Fair enough?
Yep.
Okay.
In the arm? In your arm?
There's one example is your extensor digitorum longus, or your biceps femoris.
Biceps. Extension. Torn.
Okay, and tibialis anterior and extensor digitorum longus. Okay, so no.
Do you need to know all those muscles?
It would be helpful for the job if you did know a good chunk of them. Because if you know, I mean, to be honest, as much as I know them purely because of repetition in my job, if one of my clients asks me what specific muscle I'm working on, I'm not going to give it a Latin name for it. I'm basically going to say, oh, we're just working through the calves here, the gastrocnemius, or I'm just going to work through your quads. I'm not really going to be like, I'm going to work through this specific, just confuse the fuck out of them unless they really want to know. But as long as you know the origin and insertion, the movement pattern, the role, and the responsibility of that muscle, learning what its name isn't necessarily necessary.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But if you know its role and function, you know where it is, you know what it's responsible for, you know what movements it's involved in, you know how to isolate it, you know what happens if it's dysfunctional. It doesn't really matter that you don't know the name of it.
Yeah.
But it's helpful to know the names, if that makes sense. Who's bleeping? Holy fuck.
Fire drill, everybody out.
Whoever it is, fucking go on mute. Mute yourself.
I'm fucking trying to.
Oh, there you go.
Steve.
That's the choir across the way.
Apparently not. I put myself on mute in case it was me, but Paddy seems to be the culprit.
So, sort of.
Paddy felt.
Me again.
Your
That's a
dinner's ready.
Again, I know.
That's a different sound from Saturday.
And it was ready.
Well done, son.
It's always Paddy.
No.
I know. Did you notice that, Bobby?
Where am I here?
Bobby hears everything.
So, if you're looking at your revision list, what's the next thing that he has written down?
Multifidus.
What did you say there, Jen?
Multifidus origin and insertion, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's all you need to know. I'm not going to clarify any further, okay? If I did, I would literally just be like, "Here's the answer."
I don't even
Okay?
know.
Well, for Paddy's benefit, go ahead.
No.
We're friends, eh?
Okay. And what other muscle has he?
Anterior tib or
Okay, cool. So that's all I'm telling you. Now, where am I here? Okay, so what is ATP? What does it stand for?
Energy.
What does it stand for? What are the actual words ATP?
Adenosine triphosphate.
Adenosine triphosphate.
Adenosine.
Good chat. Now, if we were talking about adenosine triphosphate, and we were to chat about weightlifting, maybe in specifically, what energy system would we be using?
Yeah.
Say you're just doing a one rep deadlift.
Max. What do you
Well,
ATP?
it doesn't matter. It would still be the
PCR. Sorry, ATP PCR.
ATP PCR. Okay, so what about when you're doing a 100-meter sprint, for example?
lactic.
Yep.
Oh, it was WP.
Now wait, let's clarify. This isn't me doing that 100-meter sprint. This is someone who actually so there'll be a specific time factor difference there.
Still be out.
You're still be using the
100-meter sprint about 10 to 12 seconds.
Creatine. Phosphate.
You're still going to be using. Or no. Ah, fuck, I don't know. I don't know, but I don't know.
Early doors with your energy systems, aren't you? So do you remember we were talking that the energy systems have a couple of different names? So remember the first energy system was called your ATP-PC or your phosphate energy system. The second one was the lactic energy system or the glycolytic energy system. And the third one was oxidative or aerobic.
Yeah? The lactic system kicks in about 12 to 13 seconds, up to about a minute, and then it's aerobic. Is that right?
It'd be more than a minute.
More than a minute.
It'd be more than probably about two
or three.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's that sort of 12.
Maximizing and you're building up.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's basically like your glycolytic energy system is only as good as how much you've trained it.
Yeah.
Like if
No,
you've
yeah,
never
yeah,
trained
makes sense.
glycolytically, it's never going to improve. But if you're doing boxing training, for example, or you're training for the 800 meters, and you need to specifically train that energy system. So if you've never done a HIIT class in your life, your glycolytic energy system is going to be pretty piss poor. But if you have done HIIT, well, then your glycolytic energy system is going to be better because that's what you've been rehearsing. That's how you've trained. You've trained for that energy system to allow you to go balls to the walls more often with quicker recovery. And it clears out the lactic acid quicker as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if I just be like, how long does that, if I was doing lifting or 100 meter sprint, what kind of energy system would I be using and how long would it last? Yeah. Okay, so when we are talking about anaerobic glycolysis, what fuels are we using?
Glycogen cells.
Okay, what else?
Coming from your carbs and fats.
Okay.
Yeah, so you wouldn't be using proteins for that, so you wouldn't.
No.
No. And we do remember that proteins are built from amino acids, don't we?
Yep.
Cool. Good chat. Now, when we're working glycolytically, so we're working pretty hard.
For fuck's sake.
When we're working, who's burning the toast? Mute! Mute!
You just burned 2 rounds of toast.
Hello.
Fuck's sake, Paddy!
Paddy, mute! Thank you.
If you think it's my fucking house, that's the worst part.
Now, so if we are working glycolytically really hard, what are we building up?
Lactate threshold.
What do we build? What's the actual thing that we're building up?
Lactic
Those physical
acid.
things? Lactic acid. Okay. So lactic acid means that our blood will be more acidic. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So that would cause kind of a burn, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And that burn would be I actually think I'm moving. Yeah, I'm moving. Hang on. Give me 2 seconds. I'm going to stop sharing the screen and I'm going to switch PowerPoints because we've now gone into this one. Yeah, so yeah, we were talking about the ATP-PBC lactate and oxygen systems. And there, we're going to move on to lactic energy system. Glycolysis uses muscle, fat. Yeah, okay, we got that. Over here. I want to be specific about this. I don't want to give you bullshit. Okay, so when we are working so our acid increases. Are we still able to work as hard when our lactic acid starts to build up?
No.
What stops us?
Lack of oxygen.
Okay. Why? Why is oxygen so important?
Stops the fatigue in the muscles.
By
Or well, not.
what is lactic acid apart from a big bummer when you're doing hard work? It's a fuel source. In conditions of adequate oxygen, like your endurance run, remember Mr. Finland and Mr. Britain?
Yeah.
Mr. Finland can go on like a Duracell bunny because he has adequate oxygen for the output that he's putting in. He's not sprinting. He is running at a pace that he knows he can maintain for 26.2 miles without burning out. That takes practice and training. Because if he was to get overly excited because it's the Olympic final and he tore out quicker to try and get ahead, he's going to pay for that 13 miles down the road. So he has to have a lot of discipline to keep pace. That's why pace is so important to endurance runners, because they know their body, they know where their lactic threshold is, and in order for them to keep going for the full duration of the race and not burn out at any point, be able to maintain standard, then you know, you're gonna need to watch your pace. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Because he needs to have enough oxygen circulating the system to break down that lactic acid as it's being built so it does not become problematic.
Right.
All right?
Okay.
Cool. So when we're talking about VO2 max, la 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 la. Oop. Okay. Don't mind me scanning.
Is that like the 50 to 70%?
Yes. You basically said it, so it saved me saying it.
Okay.
Did everybody hear that? Ah, here it is.
Yeah.
Here it is. Oh shit! There it goes. See this point here, the crossover point from predominantly fat to predominantly carbohydrate. See this VO2 max percentage. Good chat,
Yeah.
guys. Good chat. Good chat. Now, I don't need to go over the next question. We literally had a good chat about it, but we do want to remember about OBLA. What does OBLA stand for?
Onset blood lactate accumulation.
Okay, cool. And you can see that onset blood lactate accumulation occurs at 4 millimoles, can't we? Okay. So what does all OBLA actually mean? What is the crack with it?
Lactic acid built up in the blood.
When the production overtakes the removal. Okay, so see the slide that you're looking at?
Yeah.
Remember we chatted to you before about there's always that freebie question that I always give you because it's a mean question. So basically the question, and I quote, involves factors that could contribute to an individual having a low lactic threshold or a low onset blood lactate accumulation. And you know, we've got A, B, C, and D. So if we took this like low lactic threshold or onset blood lactate accumulation, so if you don't have enough oxygen delivered to your muscle cells, you're going to suffer from lactic acid. If you don't have enough concentrations of your enzymes to oxidize your pyruvate, you're going to suffer with lactic acid. If you have insufficient mitochondria in the muscle cells, you're going to suffer. If your heart muscles and other tissues are not good at extracting lactate from the blood, well, then you're going to suffer. But if we remove this word, then your muscles, heart, and other tissues are good at extracting lactate from the blood. Okay? So in the option and the answer, this word might not, hashtag is not there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Laura Lou, can you go off loud? Can you go off loud? Can you go off loudspeaker? I can hear everything. Thank you. I'm nearly done anyway. I love you. She's doing a Zoom meeting with all her work ones. They're doing a music quiz. And all I can hear is loudspeaker. Use fucking headphones. Anyway. Don't tell her I was bitching. So yes, the removal of the word not kind of makes everything makes more sense. Now, what's next? Alright, so the role of the tricuspid valve in the heart. So do you see that sentence that basically explains the role of the tricuspid valve in the heart? How the blood flows back into the right atrium when the right ventricle contracts? Good chat. Good chat. Okay. There's very little I can kind of explain that kind of that's basically what it does. That's its function. Just remember where it goes and where from and where to, and you are absolutely laughing. Okay. The next one is, I'm going to fast forward through here, the sounds of your heart. You've got a lub and a dup. And I know that I know for a fact that Laura didn't do what I told her to do because she told me she couldn't do it. But basically, a heart sounds like this. So the first sound is a lub, where the atrioventricular valves and surrounding fluid vibrates as valves close. So whenever people think that your heart beats, it's not so much beat as the movement of blood causing a vibration. So it's more like a heart vibration, but it kind of doesn't sound as cool as a heartbeat. So, and then you've got your dup, and that is the, okay? But I want you to concentrate on the lub. So you see the sentence involving lub there? You're laughing if you've got that. Now, anybody got any questions about that?
Is it actually the sound of the valves closing?
It's the sound of the vibration of the fluid as they pass through the valves as they close. So if you can imagine, do you know the way if you put your ear to a hose that is running water, you'll hear like a, it's basically kind of that. It's the sound of the movement as opposed to the valve itself.
Okay.
So as the valve opens, like if you open a valve, you get a yeah?
Yeah.
So it's the actual that is the beat.
Okay.
It's not the valve itself, but the stuff going through.
No.
Yeah. I should be doing I was going to give you an example by trying to stop mid-flow when you're peeing. That'll give you a good idea of what it sounds like. Now, next is the vasomotor center. Now, remember when we were chatting about baroreceptors? What do baroreceptors do? The word barometer is in there.
Say that again, sorry.
A baroreceptor. What does a barometer measure in the weather?
Temperature.
Air pressure, okay?
Pressure.
So baroreceptor in your heart, what do you reckon it's, or just above your heart, what do you reckon it's measuring?
Blood pressure.
Blood pressure, okay? So your baroreceptors are in the carotid artery and at the top of the aortic arch, and they're responsible for telling your brain what pressure your blood is at any particular time. So remember their location and their function.
Tell me that again.
Baroreceptors, in the same way that a barometer measures air pressure, your baroreceptors measure blood pressure. And they tell the brain if you've got high blood pressure or if you've got low blood pressure, because that's going to elicit a response in the brain. So if you've got high blood pressure, then your body's going to take action to try and reduce your blood pressure. So it'll like vasodilate your arteries. So it'll lower your blood pressure. It might make you, in an active perspective, it might make you sit down as opposed to knocking your balls in. It'll be like sit down, you're going to feel faint. And if it needs to, it will force you to faint to make you, to allow your blood pressure to drop.
And they're in the wall of the internal artery?
Whoever's speaking, it sounds like a machine through a grinder. So get closer to your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, I can hear you now. All right. What's cat?
So they're in the wall of the internal
carotid artery, yeah.
Carotid artery.
Yeah. And also at the top of your aortic arch. So you can see the wee green jobbies here. Top of the aortic arch. Now remember, whenever blood is leaving the heart, it leaves through here, this massive big artery, and then it diversifies off to the major areas. Now your carotid is basically, your carotid artery takes everything up towards your brain. So of course, if you're going to have a message going to the brain anyway, it may as well be in the artery that's going to the brain. That's why the baroreceptors are in this one and not any of the rest. And the top of the aortic arch. So you're getting a signal from here. So you're getting a signal about the blood pressure that's going around the body, and you're getting a signal about the blood pressure going towards the brain. Does that make sense?
That's the vasomotor center, yeah, you're talking about here then?
It's to do with the vasomotor center, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay? So as long as you remember where they are. Now I'm going to blast forward here to blood and blood components. We were chatting, we have our red blood cells and our plasma. We're going to concentrate on white blood cells, okay? Now, do you remember, I'm basically going to break it down to you. You've got your white blood cells, you've got granulocytes, and every single one of your granulocytes are in Phil's gang. And they are all responsible for getting rid of parasites, destroying bacteria, and things like that, okay? They're all in Phil's gang. Your neutrophils, your eosinophils, and your basophils. Now, one thing you would note, are globulins in Phil's gang?
Nope.
No.
Good chat. Good chat, guys. Good chat. Oh, I thought it just posted there. I didn't. Just need to rewind down again. Oh, hello, son. Oh, because your mummy not giving you any attention. Is she not? Mum. Are you away? Lovely.
What kind of dog is it, Jim?
Collie Cross, he's basically a Heinz 57. His mum was the granddaughter of two dirty collies, and his dad was a complete tourist.
When you described the tail, I thought there was collie in there somewhere.
He literally has a Tina Turner tail. It's ridiculous. It's great. Like he is like salt. He's like pepper and sauce. He's kind of like a brown and black brindle, but his undercarriage is completely grey. His thighs are white. Well, the hair in his thighs are white at the back, and his tail is just grey, but like not like normal grey. It's literally like a perm, like Tina Turner grey.
I'll send in a picture of my my border collie later. No, Sarah, unreal.
Doggos. I'm gonna send a video of him wagging his Tina Turner tail. It's ridiculous. So the next thing we're going to look at is stroke volume. Now, before I even get to the slide, what's stroke volume? Impress me. It's in the next slide. So stroke volume.
Was the amount of breaths per minute? Is that what it was?
I thought you said the amount of breasts per minute.
It was a Freudian nip.
Forgot about that night.
So if we're talking about stroke volume of the heart,
The amount of blood ejected from the left ventricle or something, isn't it?
Left ventricle on a single contraction.
Stroke volume, the volume of blood pumped during each heartbeat.
Yeah.
Okay? So, yeah, if you were thinking about it as the amount of blood ejected from the left ventricle in a single contraction, you'd be on to a winner. Right? In other words, good chat. Good chat, guys. Good chat. Now, the last thing that we are going to look at is, okay, well, there's your stroke volume, right? The amount of blood ejection from the single, blah, blah. There's your, yeah. Starling's law of the heart. Blood entering the left ventricle. Now, remember, the left ventricle is basically the last place it goes before it gets ejected throughout the body, up to the brain and around the body. There's a lot of work to do. So, blood entering the left ventricle stretches the wall of that ventricle. The more the wall is stretched, the harder it will contract and the more blood it will pump out. Going back to our example of that being the balloon. So if you have a balloon and you blow it a wee bit, like, and then you let it go, it's like, right? But if I was to blow the shit out of that balloon and I stopped it just before it was about to pop, like, so I have lots of blood entering the left ventricle. It stretches the wall of my balloon, the wall of the ventricle. The more the wall is stretched, the harder it contracts. So if I blow loads of air into it in the same way the blood will enter the ventricle, if I let go of the balloon, yeah? So the more the wall is stretched, the more my balloon was stretched, the harder it's going to contract and the more blood is going to pump out. So the more air I put into my balloon, the more my balloon wall stretches, the harder that air will escape when I let the balloon go. Can't explain it any easier than that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Spotty dog. Okay. So I want you to remember which ventricle specifically. Okay? And the fact that it's more. The more the wad is stretched, the harder it contracts, the more blood will pump out. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Happy days. Does anybody? I'm gonna stop sharing the screen now. You have all of this stuff. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
Thanks so much, Jen.
Thank you.
No, I wanna have a wee look at your wee
That was awesome.
faces.
Yeah,
Oh no,
thank
I'm
you.
turning my camera off. I'm a tube. But yeah, so any questions, by all means, please chat to me. I'm actually really thankful that nobody put anything in the chat because I completely forgot about it.
Be online on Saturday morning. If you have any questions?
Lol. To be fair, guys, this is being recorded, so if you do need to go over anything again virtually, which reminds me, I may actually stop the recording. I'm going to stop the recording now. So bye, recording people. Study hard. Wash your hands.
Jen, have you got all them? Oh, wait till you stop recording.
Yeah.